Well, I look pretty.
Hey Bob, good to see you, man.
Stevo, how are you? What's going on?
I'm good. I'm good. It's all happening. You mentioned that you were doing some shows recently with Lez Zeppelin. Uh, uh,
Yes.
what was it like hearing them do Zeppelin tunes every night, man?
Well, it's interesting because you will never hear those songs played live by the original band, right? And it kind of makes me think of I mean, I like some of that stuff, and it's always good. You can listen to records all you want, but there's the experience of being in a room with people who are all there, like-minded, to enjoy music that is meaningful to them, right? That's a powerful experience that is kind of fading into the background these days for a variety of reasons. But to hear those songs performed live, especially by four women, is like culturally interesting. And I've done several hundred shows with them. I know the Zeppelin catalog pretty much inside and out. If they should decide that they need to play some shows, I'm their guy.
I know they've
Right?
been around for like since the early 2000s. Steph Paynes has been the one constant, so I imagine you have
Right.
a good relationship with her.
Well, it's her baby. Our relationship is a little strained right now, but that's okay. I actually did my last show on Saturday.
Now I have to ask you this. Did you ever at any level work with any of the Led Zeppelin guys at all? Any of them?
Never drew a paycheck from any of them. But an interesting point was that I was in San Francisco in late July of '77 doing some shows with singer-songwriter Garland Jeffries,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And at the time, I was Aerosmith was on a short hiatus before starting a ramp up, going to Europe and all that. So Jack Douglas said, "Why don't you go out and do this?" So I went out and did it. And while I was there, Shoko, the Texas PA company, was trying to get me to take the Zeppelin PA after because there was their last American show for the year. The rest of the Zeppelin stuff would be in Europe, right? So they invited me to come over both and see the PA and actually get some hands-on experience, right? So that was at the Oakland, outdoor. It's a very famous show. It was actually the last two shows they ever played in America, right? So I actually got to mix a couple of songs, right?
Really?
At the end of like a boring ass 4 hour show in the sun, it's like, yeah, they're really great. I mean, they were tired. It's like their peak was 75. By 77, it wasn't. I mean, like you have to think that 76, 77, you have the onslaught of punk music, and the
Yeah.
songs were 2.5 minutes long, and it was exciting, and they're full of piss and vinegar, both in New York and then the later LA thing, right? All of a sudden, that thing about like, that some of these bands were dinosaurs was beginning to, really settle in. You begin to go, this long drum solo. Oh no, that was like that's when everybody would go to
No.
the bathroom, except for the drummers. And it started to hit me as being like, I see a change, right? You see these cyclic changes all of a sudden, like where there's a newer audience coming in, like right now, like everybody has a short attention span, right? And nobody has the time. Even now, I'm going to be looking at the clock all the time on this because I'm on this crusade to like, podcasts are too long. Let's get to business really fast.
We're going to do
You
that
know,
here. We
I
are.
know we
So
are,
that means I'll
but
skip that.
I am not going to stay past an hour.
Okay.
Even then, I'm kind of going. That's like really pushing the limits to me. So
Yeah. So that
yeah,
means
so I
I'll.
got and like I've had I've had I met Jimmy Page in a in the after hours club in New York City, right back, I don't know, so around 75, something like that.
Not surprised
And,
about that.
and it was interesting because he was very nice and like, and I got to talk with him about all this technical stuff about his use of compression in the studio. And it was pretty cool actually, and he likes the Led Zeppelin concept. In fact, he says that they're the only only band true to the spirit of the original band. Now you can take that however you want, you know. But and Robert Plant too. Yeah, I was in a guitar store and I was playing some very Steve Vai stuff to kind of impress somebody to buy this guitar, right? And he tapped on my shoulder. And I turned around as Robert Plant. He goes, I could use a guy like you. And I turned and I said to him, don't fuck with me. Right. And then I realized who I was talking to, but he had gone at that point. And he was accompanied by a friend of mine from Texas who said, like, he was really blown away that you just dismissed him with a wave of your hand. I was like, well, I was trying to make a sale of a guitar, you know? I mean, like, I thought he was fucking with me, you know, but, you
I
know, they are what
once
they are.
I once peed in a urinal next to Robert Plant in L.A. It's true, I
Okay.
did. And I was going to say something before. I mean, if we want to keep it short, then we have to skip ELP. It's a
Skip
joke.
what?
ELP, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. We'll have to
Oh,
skip
why?
them.
What do you want to know?
No, no, I fell asleep once at an ELP show, which is embarrassing. It's the only
I could
time
understand that.
because
Probably during the piano solo.
you were talking about the long song thing. No,
Oh
no.
yeah, no, no. Listen, I fell asleep during an Aerosmith show. Oh fuck! I hope they don't listen to this. I did, right? Because there was a point in their career where they worked really hard. You know, I mean, like 5 shows in a row, travel day, 5 shows. They were traveling by commercial plane. I was in a van, right, complaining the entire time because I didn't want to be there, right? I'd gone from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, where there was like everything was first class, to be riding around in a van, you know, going far, you know, 400 miles after a show, checking into a hotel, laying down for an hour and a half, and then go repeat the process. And I was like, my career has plummeted. On an ELP note, though, when I left ELP, a week after I came back, I started working for the New York Dolls, right? And I went to see ELP play Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City. This is the summer of '74, right? And their engineer said to me, we can't believe how your career has plummeted, going from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the top of the pile, to some band that dresses like girls. And I turned to him and I said, but I don't have to stack PA or load the truck anymore. I travel with the band. And they went, you travel with the band? I go, yeah, pretty much. You know, I mean, like I always travel with the band. And so I really don't do anything except mix the show. And that kind of, then they got very quiet. And
I got something on
your
Aerosmith, but
career has, I love how your career has plummeted.
yeah, right.
Who's talking about ELP now?
Yeah,
You.
I've got
No,
something about,
you know, I listened to a show tape recently, and you know, there was a time and place for everything, and they
yeah,
were playing 20,000 seaters, you know. So there you go.
I got something on
What does that bring
Aerosmith.
us to Johansson?
No, I've got something on Aerosmith though I was going to tell you, but I'm going to hit that later. I wanted to
Okay.
ask you a question I don't think we talked about before. Um, when you were young, right, before you started working, where did you grow up and what got you into rock and roll?
Okay. I grew up. I was born in Newark, New Jersey. I'm a North Jersey guy, right? I grew up in Kearney and went to high school in Jersey City to a fancy college prep school, right? And I grew up in a household that just adored music. My father was a jazz and blues guy. My mom was a country music fan. My grandmother, who lived with us every Saturday morning, was Polka Saturday. And there was nothing like staying out late on a Friday night and like being in your room and all of a sudden hear Who Stole the Kishka, you know, by Johnny T and his Polka Kings, you know, at like 8 a.m. But I learned to respect a lot of genres, right? When my father heard the Rolling Stones, he said, "You need to go to the source." I went, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Like," and he gave me a Muddy Waters record and a Howlin' Wolf record, which scared the pants off of me. The Howlin' Wolf record. I
Wow.
was like, "Man, these Limey guys are kind of lame compared to this stuff," you know. And so, you know, my parents also decided that my sister, both of them were technical people. They both were in the Navy. My father became an electrical engineer. My mother worked for RCA making tubes. She was
Wow.
like yeah, it was all done in Harrison, New Jersey. Every guitar amp tube made by RCA was made like one bus stop from my house. And my mom would bring me these two. I was fascinated by outer space, so she'd bring me these weird looking tubes that looked like, outer space kind of stuff. And she said, as long as you don't throw them out of the second floor window, I'll keep doing this. Because, kids they want to see what survives at being thrown out of the second floor window. I was really surprised how old records would really break. My father didn't like that very much, but that's the way it goes. And so they also said that my sister, this is what they wanted. They go, we want you each to take up a musical instrument for a year. And at the end of a year, if you don't want to pursue it, you're free to let it go. So this is the funny part. So they took me. I was like 7. My sister was 6. They sat us in front of the TV and they put on Lawrence Welk, because on the Lawrence Welk show, every instrument gets a little feature. Right. My father was a jazz guy. He was going like saxophone is the way, Bob. That's the path. Saxophone. And if you have to, you could go like that Miles Davis guy and play a trumpet. Right. Yeah, and but I saw the guitar player, this guy, Buddy Merrill, playing a Strat. He stood up. He was smiling. He looked so cool. So I just said, like, I'm going with cool. And my father said to me, he goes, what's wrong with sax? I go, when they play, they all grimace. Right. They all make this pursed lips, blowing really hard, hitting high notes and all that. And they all kind of look unhappy, right? The guitar player, he was a smiley guy. He had a thing that looked like it didn't even look like a guitar. It looked like something from another planet, And I go, that's where I want to go. I kept up with it. My sister chose piano. After a year, the piano that we had in the house became a table just for place for mail to go when
Oh, that's
it's in my
sad.
house now, that piano.
Wow, that's
Yeah, so
cool.
that's what started my decline into music, and not being a rocket scientist like my father. My father designed missile guidance systems, worked on the lunar landing module. It's and when it came time to have a PA for my band, he would call up manufacturers and get plans for speaker cabinets from like JBL and Altec Lansing, and then he loved carpentry and he'd build me speaker cabinets in the basement for my
Wow.
band. So I had a band with a really killer PA. And when I wasn't working, I'd rent my PA out to other bands because I had a PA that you could play like a baseball, not baseball, but like a basketball court with. I had enough power and enough
Of course you
technology.
did.
It wasn't like a boat. Yeah, of course I did. The,
um,
the, the decline continues.
you once said, I'm going to go from topic to topic here. You once said you worked with Iggy Pop and the Stooges because no one else wanted to. How was that career move for you?
It was really good because it no, you know what? Yeah, because no, see, the thing was, it was to do. I was aware of the Stooges, and this is an interesting thing too, because my father, as well as being like a rocket scientist, was also a semi-pro bowler, right? And every year we would go to like Syracuse and Detroit, drive in our fine Chevy, 52 Chevy, 55 Chevy, right out there, and see America first was like, he said, you got to go and see real America. So we'd go to Detroit and we'd stay with some cousins there, and I had 2 cousins who were around, when I was around 14, 15, 16, they would go like, you know, let's go out and we'll go downtown and we'll go to the Grandy Ballroom and there's these bands playing I think you'd really like. So I went down, I saw like the Stooges and the MC5 open up
Wow.
for these other bands and stuff, and it was really put an impact, right? With the Stooges things, they came to New York to play a run of 5 shows at Max's Kansas City, and nobody wanted to do it because you had to move gear up a flight of stairs,
Those
right? And they
stairs.
ordered too much gear, as typical Stooges thing, too much gear for a place that held 200 people. And I said, like, well, I'd love to see this band up close, for free. So I did those shows.
That's
And
fantastic.
the thing is that after those shows, their tour manager, Chris Aaron, called me up and said, you know your stuff. The band is so impressed. They go, we want you to come and do these two shows, October 3rd and October 4th, at the Michigan Palace, because they're really important to us. And we want you there to make sure they run good. And I was like, wow, this is how green I was. I go, I'll start driving tonight. Right. And he went, no, there's a plane ticket, a round trip plane ticket waiting for you at Newark Airport. Right. And so it was the first band that ever flew me anywhere. And when I got there, I showed up at the hotel and they go, you have your own room. And I was like, wow, someone's paying for a plane flight and a hotel for me to come and do these two shows. And it was crazy. It was nuts.
It's a
Um,
pretty
I
good start to the resume having the Stooges at the top of the resume. That's
Well,
pretty
I
good.
mean, like, look at it. I went from actually the Stooges predate Emerson, Lake and Palmer, right? Emerson, Lake and Palmer for me is January of '74, right? And but the thing was, that place I worked, I met a lot of people, a lot of people. In fact, these guys that were working for Peter Frampton eventually thought that Peter Frampton was going nowhere, so they moved to ELP. And then they said ELP's getting cheap. They don't want to bring the entire PA crew. They want to hire two American guys. And we think you should be one of those guys, right? So off
Wow.
I go, flying every day with like 25 English guys who would started drinking when the alarm went off. They carried a portable bar. And back then you could, it's when you have 20 people traveling on a plane together and you could smoke and they'd be drinking and smoking. And this is '74, man.
Good old days.
Yeah, it was like, how much more rock and roll could it be?
No.
So
Um,
it's pretty funny. But the thing is that it changed people's perception of me in New York as not like the guitar player that, managed the rehearsal studio that everybody went to. All of a sudden, I was a guy that a band felt valuable enough to fly me to another city to make sure their show went right. And it changed everything for me.
it's fantastic. You mentioned Max's. Is it true at Max's you could see anybody on any given night? Were you ever there like when, say, Lou Reed and David Bowie were there hanging out?
Yeah, I was. See, it was the spot. I would be done at Baggy Studios like at midnight. I'd lock it up and then go up to Max's because that was the hang.
Yeah.
That was the place to be. And yeah, I mean, like you walk in and you see David Johansen sit with David Bowie. He goes, "Come on over, sit down." And it's just
Wow.
like come down and look at this guy with no eyebrows, going like, I told him, I said, yeah, actually, I bought tickets and I went and saw you at Carnegie Hall. And it goes, what do you remember about that? That they took my camera away. I thought you were pretty good. I was pretty impressed.
What about
That's
Lou? What about Lou, man? Did you ever talk to Lou? Because I love Lou. Well,
plenty
I
of
loved.
times because Lou, he was into his gear, right? I talked to him more when I was working after my first retirement from touring in 1979. I'd had enough of seeing bands shoot to the top and then tailspin and crash. I mean, it was like one right after another. New York Stooges, boom. New York Dolls, boom. Aerosmith, boom. I go, this is not. This is kind of like tragic in a way. To
Mm.
watch people get successful and then when the money or not successful. I mean, because it's the same thing. Either you don't succeed or you succeed, and you wind up unhappy and you crash and burn. So I was good with guitars and stuff like that. So I worked at this store on 48th Street, and Lou would come in, and we would, he was a friendly guy, really. And up until we had some good conversations. I thought it was really interesting. I did shows with Laurie Anderson, and then they
Oh yeah.
became a couple, and that was even weirder. So, but I saw him rehearse with Cyndi Lauper, right?
Wow.
to do like Cyndi Lauper's Christmas show. And it's like, I don't know if you've ever dealt with her, but she is, I don't know how does one put this? Tough,
I believe
tough,
it. I've never
right?
met
So
her,
they're
but
singing a duet, and she keeps turning to him and going, there's a melody. There's an actual melody, Lou. Because you know how he sang Lou style, right?
Lou being Lou.
So at this point, I decide to go to the sound check for her at the Beacon, right? Because I wanted to see this progress, right? And she made him wait and wait and wait, and then I was standing on the side of the stage, and you could just see the smoke coming out of his ears, and he just gets up and leaves, right? And she's like, "Where's Lou?" And I go, "Hope he comes back." So no, I saw him. It was funny because Walter Becker had a recording studio on the second floor SIR on 25th Street. And we're right above the big room. So we could hear what was going on in the big rooms, and like when Eric Clapton was rehearsing, we would just talk shit about Eric Clapton. Like he used to be great. Did you go see him at the Cafe a Go Go? I go, yeah, I did. Actually, it was the loudest show I've ever been to in my life because it was like a 200-seat club and they each had two stacks of Marshalls. And I thought it was like, this is great. It's just like mind numbing, right? And then at one point, Lou Reed was rehearsing, and Becker starts playing along with "I'm Waiting for My Man." Right. And I was
Yeah.
like going like, wow, this song. He goes, yeah, and I know the lyrics too. I go, well, why don't you go downstairs and sing it with them? He wasn't going to do that.
um,
But I miss the guy. I mean, his body of work stands for itself. I think he'll be appreciated a lot more when people realize that he had, people talk about it. Come on, rock and roll animal.
I was going to say, there's no way that you wouldn't like the intro to Sweet Jane. That's guitar heaven right there.
It's two of the greatest guitar players in history, I mean, who are on a lot of people's records, that people don't know about, or they do now
Well,
because
Aerosmith, that came out. Yeah.
yeah, that's two songs, and like, but that's what they did. They're all over the Alice Cooper records. They're all
Yeah.
over anybody Bob Ezrin had anything to do with, you'll find, they're on Kiss records, whatever. But I mean, right now somebody is ghosting on somebody's record because they can't play the part or they're not tight enough. I know guys whose whole thing it is like when the band goes home from a recording studio, that they come in and they redo their parts on their own gear, right? And then the band comes in the next day and goes, "Wow, that's way better than I remember it." Right? that's why why producers don't give out rough mixes, because there's finagling going on sometimes. I
That's
don't know. I mean, it's that's 70s, 80s. I mean, I'm sure someone's part is being replaced. Speaking about parts being replaced, I think the champions of that were, Walter and Donald and Steely Dan. They would torture you for hours. And then when because they didn't have the Pro Tool style technology where you could keep that thing, they go, man, that guy was really great, but it's not what we're looking for. Erase his parts. And they're gone, just like that.
I was going to talk about something else, but I'm going to go to Steely Dan because I saw them in 2022 minus Walter Becker, who wrote many of the band's iconic hits with Donald
With Donald.
Fagen. It was good, but I'm sure it was nothing like before. You worked closely with Walter for a long time. Can you talk about your relationship with Walter?
Yeah, here's the deal with what happened was at that same rehearsal studio in 1973, right? ABC TV had this kind of a pioneering thing where they would broadcast live from a venue in Brooklyn called Banana Fish Garden, right? And
Okay.
they would also broadcast the stereo mix over like WNEW FM. So you would see a concert on your in the comfort of your home and hear it in super high quality off of your
Right.
FM stereo radio, right? So Steely Dan comes in and rehearses 2 days, right? I wind up, they were renting some gear, and I went with the gear over to this, right? And did these shows. It was my first real adventure in TV broadcasting and the like, right? And then a million years later, a friend of mine who was working for Steely Dan, who was also he worked for Rush for 20 years, right? Calls me up and says, "Listen, I said I'm doing these demos with Walter Becker for his solo record, and I've got to go out and do Brian Setzer's orchestra tour." He goes, "Could you come in and just record some rehearsals for him?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." He goes, "And you'd have to pull his bass amp out of the locker, right? And then, like, I'll give you keys to his locker." So I go down there, and he walks in. He goes, "So you're Skip's friend, right?" I go, "Yeah, I am." He goes, "I remember you from that dodgy rehearsal studio down in what is now Soho." And I was like, "Wow, you have a good mind for detail." So we did these rehearsals, and the first thing he tested me is he wanted to record these rehearsals on every available format, and that meant cassette, mini disc, 2 disc, reel to reel, right? So you're operating 4 machines, right, and like documenting. So he could go back and listen to like certain. I want to hear the third take of this, right? It was a test. It was the toughest test I've ever taken, right? Then he comes in the next day and he takes all the media home, comes back the next day and goes like, "We're just going to do cassette." Right.
Wow.
I was like, "Oh, that's even worse." So all you're writing is every time, the cassette's rolling, you're going 001 to, 1 2 3, because he would go, "I want to hear the third take," and you have to roll it back. And, you didn't have location markers on cassette machines then. So you had to kind of, fidget to get it. "What's taking so long?" This is when I realized that this guy has no patience, right? But at the end of this training period or testing period, actually, he said, "I could use a guy like you out on with Steely Dan." I go, "I'd love to mix this band. I'm a really good engineer." He goes like, "Well, I know that." He goes, "But I have a better job for you." I go, "Really?" He goes, "For one, engineers have a very short lifespan in this organization. And I think we should keep you around." And I go, "Why is that?" He goes, "Because I'm 6 months older than you. Donald's a year older than you." Because during the conversations, he would say, like, "Did you ever go see the Mothers at Cafe Go Go?" Or no, not Cafe Go Go, at this other venue, and they brought Marines on stage. It's a very famous incident, the Garrick Theater, and I was there. And he goes like, "Were you there with the Marines?" I go, "Yeah, because it was $3 to get in that show. We would just go every night because it was cheaper than going to the Fillmore and seeing shitty blues bands from England." And so we all grew up within 2 miles of each other. Him in Forest Hills, Donald Fagen in Passaic, New Jersey, and me in Kearney. And he says, like, we all have the same cultural influences. And I can tell by working with you that we're on the same page. Maybe not with Donald. I don't think anybody's on the same page with Donald. I'm not even on the same page with Donald, right? So what happened was I kind of first was a production coordinator, making sure their dressing rooms had bagel and cream cheese in
Yeah.
them, right?
Yeah.
Which is very, very interesting stories about bagels in Norway, right? To look, I go, "I need a bagel. I need, 8 bagels." And they go, "What is a bagel?" I go, "It's kind of like a donut, but it's kind of like bready." I said, "If you can get me something round with a hole in it that had a little, crusty on the outside, soft on the inside, it'll work." I go, "They just look at them. They never really eat them." In fact, at one point, I used the same 8 bagels for like a month, right? I kept them in a drawer in a wardrobe case. If the bagel, I just like, "Let's just see," and then we'll just blame it on the promoter that you got a stale bagel that was hard as a rock, and send out for more. I can feel a lightning bolt coming from the other side right now.
Well, nothing you tell me about Steely Dan will surprise me because they are so different than everyone else. I mean,
Well,
can you compare that band to anyone, really?
I would say that they had a significant impact on how I listen to things, because I worked on I worked on Sunken Condos with Donald. Not a lot, just like a lot of interesting tracking stuff in the beginning, which was done in the basement of a condominium, right? And I worked on Becker's Circus Money, right? And he would go, "You hear that? You hear what that guy's doing?" And I didn't hear it, right? And over my 12 years that I spent working with those guys, right, it fine-tuned my hearing in a very unusual way, because they would, say, um, to watch how they worked, the way that they could, like Becker, his bass playing is phenomenal. And
Oh
Donald,
yeah.
the fact that he would sit there in a rehearsal room, and I always had to have like music sheet paper and pencils. He goes, "I need a couple pages." And he would sit down and he'd write out some horn charts, right? Not with a keyboard. He would just write this stuff out because he could hear it in his head and transcribe it to paper. And then he'd go and he'd write in the top, trumpet, sax, baritone, sax, trombone. And then he'd hand it to them and they would play it. And then he'd go, "Get those back for me. I got to make some changes." And to watch him do that, to me, that was like incredibly magic.
Yeah.
That you could hear it in your head and write it down and then have these guys play it and it be spectacular. I used to tell people, I go, what has influenced your guitar playing most about from Steely Dan? And I would say Becker when he played bass, and the trombone player, Jim, who was like the Jimi Hendrix of trombone. Amazing player. And right now, I guess they're dormant. I don't think they're doing, that they're not doing anything. Becker had a perverse sense of humor that if you've ever seen a Steely Dan show, sometimes his raps and stuff were deeper than people think. It was the kind of thing like,
Yeah, they were a very unique band. I think it's sensational, by the way, that you worked with both Steely Dan and Kiss. You can't get further apart, I don't think, can you?
I think you're right. It's funny because at one point, I forget who said,
Something
in order to
happened to your audio,
fly it
Bob.
somewhere,
Bob's